Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is the second episode of my two videos about the French Revolution. In the first episode, I talked about the political and economic crisis in France on the eve of the revolution. Then I moved on to talk about how the States General was called and how the old regime under King Louis XVI collapsed. For those of you who missed it, I'll leave a link down below. Please make sure you watch that video before you start watching this episode. If you are new to this channel, my name is Frank Zhu, and I'm a college professor teaching sociology, history, and philosophy. I'm also an award-winning landscape photographer. As I said in the first episode, France was witnessing a mounting economic crisis. Food was in severe shortage. The royal power collapsed in 1789. Riots and violence were breaking out across the country. To re-establish social order, the National Assembly, which was now in control, took quick actions. One of the first acts of the National Assembly was to destroy the feudal system by abolishing the rights of landlords and getting rid of the physical privileges of the nobles and clergy. Another act was the adoption of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen in 1789. This famous document was drafted by Marquis de Lafayette, who had fought during the American War of Independence as the right-hand man of George Washington. Lafayette obviously got inspiration from Thomas Jefferson, who was the author of the American Declaration of Independence. As a matter of fact, he received help and advice from Thomas Jefferson when drafting his document, which was in many ways an echo of Jefferson's document. For example, Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal," and Lafayette wrote, "Men are born and remain free and equal in rights." The Declaration of Rights demanded an end to exemptions from taxation. Until now, the clergy and the nobles had largely been exempted from taxes. According to the new declaration, all citizens were to have the right to take part in the making of laws. This document has become a rallying point for human rights movements around the world ever since. In the meantime, Louis XVI, now with no royal troops and little influence, remained quiet at Versailles. But he refused to sign the Declaration of Rights. On October the 5th, 1789, thousands of Parisian women, angry with the king's refusal, marched to Versailles and forced the king to accept the new reforms. This event has become known as the Women's March on Versailles. The participation of French women in the movement marked another height of the French Revolution. The crowd now insisted that the royal family return to Paris, which the king did. However, once in Paris, he virtually became a prisoner. Having announced the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, the National Assembly then focused on writing a constitution. 2 years later, the first written constitution in France was announced in 1791. According to the new constitution, France would be a constitutional monarchy. There was still a king, but a legislative assembly would be established, which would be the heart of government. The constitution dissolved the entire system of royal administration and put all government officials equally under the rule of law. The nobles and the clergy were stripped of their privileges. Separate and independent branches of government were set up. Meanwhile, the king and his wife were planning to escape from Paris. On June the 21st, 1791, the couple disguised themselves and tried to flee to Austria. When they were crossing the border guards asked them to sign a document. When Louis XVI put his signature on it, his signature was immediately recognized. Both the king and the queen were captured and brought back to Paris. The whole country was thrown into fury by his attempt to escape to a country that had become hostile to the French Revolution. What was happening in France frightened the European monarchs and upper-class people. They were filled with fear and hatred. The destruction of the established order, which had long been favorable to themselves, was the last thing they wanted to see. And they certainly would do everything to prevent it from happening in their own territories. For them, the best prevention was to restore the monarchy back to France. This mentality drove big European monarchies to declare war on France. The Legislative Assembly, which was now meeting under the new constitution, began to mobilize in response to the foreign threat. In 1792, the Assembly disbanded and called for a new national convention, which was elected in the same year. The convention blamed the king for the foreign threat, accusing him of treason. In their view, only the death of the king could make other European powers give up their attempts to restore the monarchy. Consequently, they voted to execute him. In January 1793, King Louis XVI died on the guillotine, which was a machine invented by the French for executing people by beheading. This was another event that once again shocked Europeans who still remembered the execution of King Charles I of England. Several months later, on October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette was also executed. Louis XVI and Antoinette got married when he was 15 years old and she was 14 as an Austrian princess. He was a good-natured young man and she was a beautiful and elegant young woman. The couple was loved by the French people at first. However, as years went by, all kinds of stories and gossip could be heard about their marriage and love life. According to a popular piece of gossip, Louis XVI, who had a shy and timid personality, didn't know what to do in their bedroom for some years after the wedding. There was even a malicious joke going around that the locksmith couldn't find the keyhole in the bedroom, which was a reference to Louis's lifelong love for locks. As a result, Antoinette became visibly impatient and sometimes publicly treated him with contempt. The fact that their first child was not born until 8 years after their wedding helped spread this gossip. However, most historians believe he was suffering from a kind of psychological dysfunction which took time to fix. Although Marie Antoinette initially looked down upon her husband, she eventually developed a genuine fondness for him. When she learned about his death, she was overwhelmed with grief. For his part, Louis seemed to be completely devoted to her and never took her mistresses, which was very rare for a French king in the 18th century. By mid-1794, situation started to improve for France. On foreign front, French armies were winning wars against the other European powers. Domestically, economy seemed to be recovering. In 1795, the Convention instituted yet another constitution. Under the new constitution, a three-stage election of a representative government would be held. First, electors would be elected. Secondly, electors would choose a national legislative assembly. Finally, the legislative assembly members would choose an executive body of 5 directors, which was called Directory. However, France was far from peaceful and orderly. There was chaos and confusion all over the country. The convention realized that the elections would be impossible in such situations. To ensure peaceful elections, they called upon Napoleon Bonaparte, who was now a famous military general, to put down riots. Finally, the elections went ahead, and the body of electors was elected in 1795. It is worth noting that from the beginning of the revolution until now, there had been 4 different revolutionary governments: National Assembly, Legislative Assembly, National Convention, and now the Directory. However, the Directory turned out to be incapable of governing the country. It was unpopular and unstable. In the meantime, Napoleon, who had become very politically shrewd, saw an opportunity for himself and staged a coup d'etat in 1799. Once grabbing the real power, he had himself appointed First Consul, which was a title he borrowed from the Roman times. 3 years later, in 1802, he revised the constitution and appointed himself as consul for life, thus turning himself as a dictator. However, the ambitious Napoleon was still not satisfied. He wanted to be another Julius Caesar. In 1804, he declared himself emperor at an extravagant ceremony. The crowning of Napoleon formally marked the end of the French Revolution, which was not a single event but a series of developments over the span of 10 years. As I said in the first episode, it is very difficult to over-exaggerate the importance of the French Revolution. It totally changed Europe and the world as well. Even nowadays, its impact can still be felt. For those of you who missed my 2 videos about Napoleon Bonaparte, I will leave a link down below. In those 2 videos, I talked in more detail about how he rose to power during the French Revolution and how he fell from power. Please make sure that you check them out. Well, that is all that I wanted to talk about today. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.